and welcome to Fraud Busting New Frauds podcast. It is the only podcast for female fraud professionals and their allies who want to stay on top of the fraud awareness spectrum in order to thrive professionally while maximizing their happiness and having the courage to create the life they love. Thank you for listening.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Fraud Busting New Frauds podcast. Our format today is a round table format or a coffee chat, whatever you want to call it. And so with that, we have two special guests today. And without further ado, I'd like to give our special persons and guests today the chance to introduce themselves briefly. Hi, Rolanda.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I'm Rolanda. I am the Fraud and Abuse Practice Area leader for 5 Solutions consulting firm. And part of my expertise comes from dealing with fraud, financial crimes, and abuse from the merchant side, e-commerce and retail, and also issuing and banking, acquiring, and things like that, and credit reporting. So bring with me some knowledge with a comprehensive view of fraud and financial crimes and abuse.
Thanks so much for this introduction, Rolanda. It's my absolute pleasure to have you today. And Elena, hello.
Hi, Olga, and thanks for having us here. So I'm Elena with over a decade of experience in fraud prevention and cybersecurity intelligence. Basically, I love building and implementing strategies to protect users and businesses from cybercrime and threats, and I want to create the most secure and flawless experience for clients.
Thanks so much, Elena, for this brief introduction. It's my absolute and total pleasure for you to be our guest today together with Rolanda. And so without much delay, I'd like to ask you ladies this question, which is, can you speak a little bit more about the importance of data and data quality in the process of building preventative strategies? Rolanda, you will first? Yeah, okay.
So one of the things that I pride myself on is basically building intelligible KPIs, innovative KPIs that you can actually make decisions off of, but that are also cross-functionally consumable in a way that allows you to take a top-down look at it, right? So if the data is good, if the reporting's good, the structure, the dashboarding is good, then you can drill down to insights that an investigator might like, but take it up to a high level so that the business or an executive may find useful. But the only way you can do that is if you have data that is reliable and you use the same source of truth across different cross-functional areas. One of the things that I noticed, especially dealing with data from different industries and things like that, a lot of people have a lot of vendors, right? So the data that we consume and give to our vendors can vary. How we receive it and ingest that data, it varies and things like that. But if you are able to have a source of truth that the whole business can use, the whole organization can use, then it creates the opportunity to give you some really, really good strategic insights from reliable sources. Not everybody is accustomed to testing or qualifying or auditing that data, right? And maybe for one function, some people can do well at seeing what's missing, but having someone to kind of come in and look at it across the board sometimes can be a challenge, which is understandable. People work in functional area silos sometimes, right? But the data shouldn't be a silo. The data should be the same source, ideally, right? So there's the challenge of, I'm aware that we all have data that's truncated or for PCI concerns or just looking at PII and things like that, right? So there's different compliance rules that kind of come into, especially when we deal with financial information, the card details particularly, or if we deal with consumer information or cardholder information particularly, right? So sometimes the data is limited. But hopefully one of the things that we can, kind of touch on is how to get around some of that, and really just taking a step back and saying, okay, who needs these insights, and what do we all have that we can contribute to give this data to the right source so it can live in the right place and be consumed by the right people.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks so much, Rolanda, for sharing this thought and insights and examples. I'm sure the audiences will benefit from listening to our conversation today. And Elena, would you like to add to our conversations your perspectives?
Sure. Well, Rolanda already said very important things in the area. And when we consider building the preventative strategies, data is the basic ingredient when we build preventative fraud strategies. But if we lack quality, the strategy would be worth the same. So data allows us to make decisions and adapt to changing conditions and trends. Think of it that way. Even with the least human intervention, such as using artificial intelligence and providing a specific goal to the machine, the quality of actions and results it would bring probably be average or lower. When incorporating humans, it can be even more challenging, even if incorporating expertise and psychological knowledge, such as biases, etc. Mm-hmm. We want to have as accurate and relevant information as possible while abiding to regulations, as Rolanda mentioned, so that we can enhance good customer experience and prevent bad actors' activity, meaning we want to avoid false positives and false negatives as much as possible, because we incorporate them in so many levels, such as rules, fraud engine, MFA, validation, verification, KPIs, and of course, decision-making. We should take into account that irrelevant information may cloud judgment, while underlooked important information may cause substantial losses to the company. Simply said, if we don't have relevant data, we cannot make accurate decisions.
Well, thank you so much, Elena, for supplementing our conversation with this very important perspective that you just shared. I'm grateful to both of you, Rolanda and Elena, for sharing your perspectives. And let's dive into the next question I have for you, which is, can you speak a little bit about what kind of advice can you provide to fraud investigators out there in order for them to navigate through obstacles such as missing data, missing types of data? So I don't know, Rolanda, you want to go first?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm excited to also hear what Elena has to say about this, because I know we both are very we love our data, right? We love good data.
That's a lot about it.
Right, we have a lot of thoughts about data. That's why we're here, right? So from an operational perspective, there's a challenge to navigate in some spaces professionally when you are missing data, right? Because sometimes it's a lack of support, sometimes it's a lack of communication, sometimes the data just doesn't exist, right? So first you kind of have to identify which challenge is it. Does the data not exist because you never asked for it from a vendor, because no one ever asked for it? Or does the data not exist because you don't have access to it? Does it not exist because there aren't enough engineering resources to ingest it or transform it to a usable space, right? Does the data not exist in a way that you have the expertise to access it, right? Meaning, is it in a database, or is it something that you can pull into a visualization tool? And is it ready to be consumed that way? So you first have to understand the nature of your challenge, and not just saying, hey, I need this data. Really do the work to understand what specifically you need and what's blocking that need. The more clear you can be about your specific needs, I think that the better you can advocate for your missing needs and that getting that data, obtaining that data. Not every investigator knows the rules associated with the compliance rules associated with how data needs to live and be stored and things and shared, right? So sometimes I hear investigators saying, I don't understand why they just don't give us this, right? I don't understand why they just can't give us everyone's information so I can make the choice and look at these things. But not everyone needs that, right? So if strategically the data is ingested a certain way, but if that case is made with those things in mind, you will get more cross-functional buy-in and better understanding of how it's going to be used, who's going to use it, and what decisions can be made from it, right? So missing data is not always it's not always missing. Sometimes it's just inaccessible for good reason, and sometimes it's just because someone never asked for it. So when you do start to dig around, define your challenge, articulate your intention, and build your resolution, right? And sometimes it's not about what you can code, right? Just really lay out what you're going to use it for and why. And then sometimes you may find out there are things that you were asking for you didn't actually need. So that's another piece of it as well.
True.
Yeah. So we can probably talk an hour alone about how to navigate that kind of space, or even just the particular data that's missing or what you can ask for. But for just general advice, that's where I would start.
Thanks so much, Rolanda. And I would like to quickly sneak in between a very fun story I have from back in time when I was training new teams. I would usually give the future investigators I was training this very fun analogy. I would say, okay, imagine this. You're super, super hungry. You haven't eaten for long hours, and you have a plate on a table full of food, but you're missing the knife and the fork. Are you going to continue starving, or you're going to find a different way to access the food without the tools?
Yeah,
that's a good point, right? Just you have to be strategic, right? Like you have to do what makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, resourcefulness is part of the game, and it's something that is essential to, as professionals that will work in the fraud prevention, trust and safety. We have to be resourceful because, the way the database was built before this some kind of awareness to fraud prevention came aboard, the database definitely was not organized for the fraud teams to handle it. So just adding to the challenges you mentioned, we would encounter those different situations of missing data or inconsistent data. For inconsistent data, it is important to analyze the root cause to solve the issue. For example, it may have been a third-party vendor providing analysis for data for the marketing team, but when the fraud team analyzes and build reports for the C-suite, the revenue and losses are different than those that the marketing team provided. So that causes a lack of cohesiveness and decision making based on mystery, which we want to avoid. Where we miss data, we want to ensure that we have exhausted the use of the data we have. Sometimes it is finding it in tables we didn't know of, and alternatively exploring the meaning of data that is being underlooked,
My favorite has been the mislabeled data, right? Because sometimes the people who work on ingesting the data, and like you said, they don't think of the fraud teams or the downstream impact to others who may be using the data for similar reasons. They're just kind of ingesting it within the rules that they have set before them. But the labels that they create often don't have the right insight to create something that's intuitive that someone can even find within a data dictionary, right? So you may have people who use use labels for, credit card number, for example, right? They may say credit card number versus PAN, or they may say account number versus, but if you take more than just a card, or if you only take cards, or if you take debit cards, credit cards, prepaid cards, if you have a way to better label that data, then you should use that. But if you don't know that those other terms exist, then that person ingesting it is limited to what they believe they understand the right label to be, right? And it's no knock to that person who does that. It's just that if it's not trained, or if it's not in the company's policies to do that work, to see the downstream impact, to talk to all stakeholders, versus just ingesting it, transforming it, defining it, and just leaving it there for someone to never know it exists, right? Because it wasn't labeled appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. You would have those kind of reports and graphs that would present some kind of numbers that not really consistent with the reality. Just the examples you added, and if we talk, for example, we have user ID. So user ID can be for the account, for the profile on companies, for that client of the company, but user ID can also be of the account in like in the payment service provider, and those numbers would be totally different. And this is a huge problem when you have this inconsistency, and also like even the lack of awareness that this exists, and you have to differentiate between those labels.
Oh yeah. One of the other really good examples, I think, that may freak some people out, and I'm going to warn you, right? Just amount. Seems simple, seems straightforward, right? But some people take away tax. Some people keep tax. Some people add fees to it, right? Some people don't.
Right.
And some people differentiate between net sales, just sales, or some other amount with other things added to it, right? Or taken away from it with the tax and everything like that, particularly. So though, even just having the numbers and people being accustomed to saying, well, our numbers are never the same as finance's numbers, right? But that's okay. And we're just used to that. It doesn't have to be that way, right? We can try to figure out to get as close as possible, if not using the same source of truth as we can. But to do that, we have to challenge those labels and really understand the definitions of those labels.
That's true. I just want to add to that, the amount is actually such a critical log in this, because you have companies that work internationally, and then you have different currencies. We have spoken about this, and there is this problem that you can have data of numbers, but some companies don't really align the currencies, and then they kind of review numbers when the numbers they compare are not even in the same currency. So if you look at something that, like 3,000 yang or $30, and it just, it's not actually a much higher purchase than that one. It's actually the same purchases. But the idea that you have this data, but you don't you don't really know how to use it correctly, or enhance this information and add, for example, another part of information to convert this currency to at least one currency that the company would be able to provide this more accurate information, in one currency when you show it to the board. If you have headquarters in America, so obviously you would want to present in US dollars. So it's kind of hard when you need to do much extra work for all this other 40, 50 other currencies in the table, or a few tables that you need to incorporate.
That's a great point. A great insight for that. And I'm glad I knew you understood what I was talking about as far as amount, because you've seen it with different clients and stuff too, the same as I have. One of the things that I always found interesting is with the payment service providers, right? the payment service providers, sometimes they'll say, okay, the currency was in euro, but when they send the information, they've already done the conversion into dollars. Now, whether or not that's clear to whomever's ingesting it, how that gets labeled if they do yet another conversion, not knowing whether or not it was already converted. And these things sound like, oh, no one does this. People do this, and this happens a lot, right?
It happens a lot.
It happens a lot, and it's communication, it's definitions, it's things like that. But it's okay to ask that confirmation question, like, hey, what currency is this? Just to be clear, right? Just to be clear. And it's not to say someone didn't do what they were supposed to do. It's because you can't afford for it to be wrong. That really is all it is. And if people just don't take things personally, I'm asking this question not because I don't trust you. It's just that this is trickle down information. This may have gone through three different companies, right? And my vendor may have gotten it from their vendor, right? And by the time it gets to me, I don't know who's touched it or changed it or labeled it. So I want to make sure before I touch it, or internally before it's touched, that the labels make sense. So yeah, ask those questions, confirm that data, and be confident
Yeah,
with what you're using.
absolutely. Well said, Rolanda. 100% agree with you.
Well, thanks so much, ladies, for this insightful conversation. I hope our audience will enjoy listening and, moreover, benefit from your perspectives and insights. Any final words, advice, specifically for investigators dealing with data, or generally for women in their corporate world professions, or being entrepreneurs, how to be perhaps resilient and with maintaining a positive outlook? Anything you want to share in closing?
Rolanda, go ahead.
You keep making me go first. Well, first, I would say I'm very happy to know both of you ladies in this field. When you get to know people that kind of think the way you do, not in the sense that we all agree, but just in the way that we can bounce things off of each other and challenge each other and expand each other's knowledge and things, right? So I appreciate having the relationship that we have and being able to have these types of discussions that hopefully help others. So I would say, if it's any advice, network with great people, right? And these are great people. So that's always a wonderful experience for me. As far as the data side of it, I feel like I've said everything, but just be clear. Make sure you confirm, and articulate, and don't ask for more than what you need, but make sure you know what you need.
Thank you. Very well said. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well said. I don't think I have much to add to that. Just thank you all for having us here. As always, it is a great experience and pleasure to speak with you ladies. I hope we were able to share with the listeners information to potentially broaden knowledge and help companies grow successfully.
Thank you, Elena. These were fantastic closing words for our episode today. Round table and coffee chat, whatever you call it. And thank you everyone for listening. Stay healthy and happy.